When you look at these job numbers that were created last month, it looks really great on paper. But now there's this guy online, and I have the article right here. The job market looks good only if you ignore what's really going on. So it's a real interesting piece of information that we're missing when people are saying, hey, you gotta, we've created 272,000 jobs last month. We're doing so great, right? So now I'm wondering, how are we doing so great? And how did these 272,000 jobs been created? So Household reported a stunning drop in employment by over 400,000 people. So, and another 400,000 people gave up and left the labor force entirely. The result increased the unemployment rate to 4%. So when people decide to not even compete anymore and just give up and be like, we're done, that is really, really bad for everybody, because then you're just like, I'm done. I can't take it anymore. There's not enough jobs, there's not enough good paying jobs, because there are enough jobs. So what people constantly tell me is there are enough jobs, but not enough good paying ones. So when you look at, on LinkedIn or Indeed or any of these job search websites, there's a bunch of jobs out there that they're like, hey, I'm hiring, but they're hiring for like minimum wage, asking for a master's degree and 30 years of experience for minimum wage, and that's just not going to happen. And I would also not work for that if I'd have, these qualifications and was working before, right? So now the article kind of goes on and says part of the answer is people are having to get multiple jobs to make ends meet. And I've heard that in the comment section that a lot of people, a lot of you guys picked up extra jobs, side hustles, doing all that, trying to make ends meet, but it's still really, really hard to replace a full-time job because, just the healthcare benefits alone are brutal, or you need a lot of, it's expensive and you need a lot of hours just to make up for healthcare, right? Just to pay for healthcare. So now it goes on and says that these models were not correct because the statistical problem, the double counting of multiple job holders and other factors has caused the number of payrolls to continue to climb while the number of people employed has been falling. There are now 783,000 million fewer people employed than 6 months ago. Those are huge, huge numbers. When you look at how many, if that is a real, if that is the real numbers, then that is crazy. That is crazy because those are all full-time employees with benefits, right? So, and then it goes kind of on that, foreign-born nationals are kind of taking, immigrants are taking their jobs, and that they're overcounting sometimes by 3 times are counting the same job, right? Or the same candidate has 2 different or 3 different part-time jobs. So they're basically telling, hey, there's so many new jobs now, and payroll increased by so much, but that's because people are working part-time or they got 2 to 3 jobs. So still really, really bad. And people still think, some say, hey, the economy's doing great, but it's not. It's really, really not. With all of these, with all these numbers are coming out, and they're all like, they're all saying that it's part-time work now. And it's funny because a comment of mine said the other day that they have factory workers in their facility, and she was like, I'm in HR, I work in HR, and I have factory workers underneath me, and we're paying them hourly, and some of these workers are getting 8 hours a week max. So no more than 8 hours. And they're like, people are starting to complain and trying to leave because they cannot sustain the way of life as they used to because of $8 or 8 hours a week. If you're making 20, 25, $27 times 8, that is not something that you could pay your bills on, right? So you can barely afford lunch with that, and not even if you have a family, because if you have a family and you need to pay $8, you work 8 hours and you're making $26, that's $200 a week, that's that's like almost less than $1,000 a month. So you're making $832 a month. And if you're the single breadwinner of the family, it doesn't matter if you're the if you're boy or girl or man or woman, whatever, or they them, but you're the only one making the cash and you're only working 8 hours, you cannot sustain your life on $800. Then you need to live off of savings, you're depleting all the savings because there's just not enough work left over. And then we're outsourcing jobs, to Mexico. We're increasing part-time work. And so, yeah, we are on a good track. And that kind of sees why California has such a huge unemployment numbers, because people just, they these part-timers or these full-timers are just getting to part-time work, and then they're like, hey, I need to get unemployment or something, and then they're just done, because California has like 5-something% unemployment, way more than any other state, but it's also easier to qualify. Other states don't make it that easy for you to qualify for unemployment and to be included in the stats, right? So it is so tricky when you do the statistics, but it's gotten so bad in the labor market that companies like this do not even pay their people anymore. They fire you and then they just don't even pay you. So let's look at a video.
Contract workers out at Blue Oval City in Haywood County say they are still not being paid by their contract.
Most recently, workers say dozens of people have been laid off without warning. Action News 5's Tavarius Haywood spoke with a few workers who just want to be paid what they're owed. T. Wood, we get it.
Right, and they want it. Over the past several weeks, we've received several complaints from contract workers with the State Group, a multi-trade contracting company. Some of the workers told me that they were laid off and their last checks even bounced. Now, they told me that they believe the reason behind the layoff is because they were demanding their hard-earned money.
The first company that I've had worked for where there has been this many issues with payroll.
One contractor who does not want to be identified says he was laid off last Tuesday without warning and laid off still being owed thousands of dollars from his contractor, the State Group.
This company basically let people go, and the check bounced. That they've gotten when they got fired. I feel like that is a big F you, because you're like, hey, we're going to fire you. You're going to have to go. And you're like, okay, great. Thanks. Where's my paycheck? Because, you got to get your paycheck when you get fired. And then they're like, here's your paycheck. Here's a check. Go cash it and we're good. Thank you for all the work you did. You walk off. You think you're all good. And then the freaking check bounces. So, and there's no money. How sad is that? How bad is the economy when you work for this big contractor and the big contractor doesn't even pay you? So that should be another reason to start to believe like, hey, we are not doing that great. We need some change, because this could not go on for much longer. And I wonder how many people not got paid, because when you just look at one incident, I don't think that one incident would bring the news to film it. There must be multiple people that didn't get their paycheck. And for me, as a business owner, you always need to pay your employees. If you don't take money or if you got to do something, you always got to make sure your employees get paid on time. That is a must. If you have people working for you, you got to pay up. You really, really got to pay them. And if you're not taking a salary, if you got to sell your car to make ends meet, but to keep the people on payroll, that's just what you got to do. It comes in the title of business owner. But that is for if you're a small business, right? If you're a big business owner, you just do whatever you want. You basically can go out, bankrupt your company, mismanage it, and still get millions upon millions of dollars as bonuses. So you see how there's double standards, right? For small businesses, you got to stay afloat. You got to stay lean and mean with no access of too many employees or whatnot. And when you're a big company, you can just run it all into the ground, mishire people, do all these crazy things, and you'll still be fine because you file for bankruptcy, and then afterwards you'll just get a huge money package for bringing the company out of bankruptcy, and stock's going to go up and all that. And so we got it all wrong. We got it so severely wrong that it's not even funny, because these people should not be getting any money. And if you do not pay the employees, there needs to be righteous lawyers and everything that will sue the company, because, or the parent company that put that on their contract, because you cannot have people help you build stuff, fire them, and then be like, oh, we're done. It's just horrible, 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 horrible. And what is that person going to do? Probably going to get 1 or 2 part-time jobs, or 3 of them. Going to get a few part-time jobs. So now you went from one full-time job where you're working 8 hours a day and you were, got benefits and all that. Now you need to pay for your own benefits because you need health insurance, right? And most part-time work does not pay for benefits. So let me know if you guys are in that with a few jobs rather than just one full-time, because I've seen the trend and it's coming. I'm not a fan. I really, really do not like that this trend of part-time work is such on the rise, because a lot of Americans need healthcare. And as I know company, they're not going to give healthcare to part-time workers. So guess what they're going to do? So if you're an executive, you're going to be full-time and you're just going to manage a bunch of part-timers. And what does that do? That's going to give you benefits, and actually you'll probably increase profitability, because all these people that are working part-time, you can literally extort and tell them to work longer and to not clock in and start working before they clock in and make up time, because they're so grateful that they even have a job, because that could be gone too, right? So you can be grateful to work, have meetings and be like, oh, we only pay you for 4 hours, but you still have a meeting that you need to take or something else, and it's not paid for. Because right now, you really can't complain, because if you're going to complain, then they're like, sorry, we're going to let you go, and we'll find somebody else. So, really desperate situation these people are in. And when you're in a desperate situation to try to provide for your family, you let things slide like that, right? So you basically are like, I really need the money. I'd rather work 8 hours a week than none. So you kind of, say, okay, what am I going to do? I'm still searching for a job, but as long as I'm still kind of, making something, it's better than nothing. And you have to demand to get paid for those hours, but it's so hard. And I personally would not know what to do, because I think I would also just shut up, work there, and then as soon as I get something, as soon as I am done working, or done with the shift and I got something new, I put in my 2 weeks notice and talk to a lawyer to see if I can get the back pay. But yeah, it's not good. And I would document probably everything, because you have to document literally everything. You cannot just let it slide. Everything needs to be documented, and if everything is documented, I think you have a pretty good chance of actually getting your money back, or or find somebody that can sue the company for your back pay. But it's bad to bring it up right now because they'll just tell you, then leave, and they're right. It's not a employee market, it's an employer's market. But that doesn't mean that they can pull things like that. They should be held accountable, and it is not right. But what can you do, right? It is really, really hard out there. So get your resume polished, always be networking, so you can always find another job. Never once think that you have a skill that doesn't need networking or that doesn't need a resume, because you always need to be having your resume polished, especially in those days, and have a network with people, even if they're remotely in your field. You got to network. Let me know what you think about this video, and I'll see you in the next one.